そうか。クヌートは死んだか。
Hold your horses.
いえ、正確には行方不明とのことです。
助けを送るとしても春まで待たねばならん。
王陛下におかれましてはご心中以下ばかりかと。
クヌートがもし兄のハラルドを上回る器量を持ち合わせていたなら、
Yeah, I'm getting some.
行方知れずになどならずに済んだかもしれんな。
Ah, Thorkell.
ああ、雪が降る。
After Yule.
戦争が終わる。冬よ、お前は戦士の心さえ凍らせるのか。
The poetic Thorkell.
おお、冬よ。あそこで王子に逃げられたのは痛かったな。いやいや、あんたが渡したんだろう。
Yeah.
あの王子は腰抜けだけど使い道はあったんだよな。
スベン王がブレトワルダとして認められるそうだ。
はあ、それって全面降伏じゃん。
だな。デンマークがイングランドを飲み込むんだ。貴族どもは王権を捨ててでも戦争を終わらせたいらしい。
How about that?
悪い予感ってのはどう。
Yeah, no more war, right?
玉砕覚悟でスベン王軍に勝ち込むかい。
アホ、俺は喧嘩は大好きだが負けるのは大嫌いだ。やるなら勝ちに行く。
He's so depressed.
世界中がずーっと喧嘩してたらいいのにな。
ならあいつらをなんとかしろよ。どっから見ても農民には見えねえぞ。
Wow.
意図高き方、天にいます我らの父よ。
Great little focus
こ
pull
こに
there.
眠る村人たちの魂を
Mm.
どうか身元にお召しください。私どもの罪をお許しください。
Look at that glow on it from the sun, from the sunlight. Whoa.
父よ、私の声はあなたの耳に届いているのでしょうか。
Look at that low angle.
あなたはあなたの姿に似せて私たちをお作りになった。でもその力を分けてはくださらなかった。
Ooh.
あなたが良き者も悪しき者も等しく愛されるというのなら、何のために無力な私たちを試されるのですか。父よ、私の声は
That's the shot right
あなた
there.
の耳
Wow.
に届いているのでしょうか。私はあなたの愛を
Yeah, let's see Knut's reaction to this.
やめよ。父を疑うだと。そなたそれでもキリスト教徒か。恐れを知るがいい。我らが父の愛を疑うことなどあってはならぬ。
Ooh. Different side of Knut.
我が子を愛おしく思わぬ父親など
Yeah.
いない。
Thinking of his own father. Take it in, Thorfinn.
父上。
生き残った村民の話によると、敵兵は
Oh, it's her!
100から200、すでに近隣の兵が向かっておるそうですが、
Yep.
不明とどろくトルケル閣下にもぜひ。回路と見せかけて陸路でゲインズ払い。雪に振り込められて休息中ってとこが。
Goddamn tree stump, man.
トルフィンとクヌートだ。
No mention of Askeladd.
それと
More food.
あんた弁当の用意したぜ。500人前を
Jesus.
頼んでいいや。よしよし、面白いぞ。
Look at this.
うまくするとまだまだ楽しめるかもな。あっと待てビョラン、もう一ついい機会だ。ついでにあれやるぞ。
Oh.
バレた。
Oh.
ちょっとやばい。
Oh boy.
いや、そうでなくて、アシュラットの月の話さ。月？ドカ雪に続いてくる。
He's questioning his luck now.
立て続けに来るなんて初めてだぜ。
そのウサギはスープにしてやろう。
うるせえな。 俺の飯をどう食おう
Come on, Thorfinn.
どうせどこかでかまどを借りるんじゃろ。ほれ、おい、
Come on.
スープに加えたらいかがかと。
Look at this. Go canoe.
ご苦労。血を抜いて内臓を洗っておけ。
Ah. Look at this. How about that, Thorfinn?
どうした？遠慮するな。そなたのウサギだ。
Oh boy. I think I know what Ascalad means.
うまかろうが、次は鹿でも取ってこい。
貴族ってのは食うばかりだと思ってたぜ。
Not this
趣味
noble.
だ。普段は作らぬし、ラグナルの他は誰も知らぬ。そなたも口外してはならぬぞ。
別に悪かねえだろ。
昔にタラの料
Oh
理を
boy.
作った時な。良い出来だったので、父親が持って行ったことがある。
Let me guess. He tossed it.
だが陛下は召し上がるどころか激しくお怒りになった。
It's kind of like Sanji.
王の子が卑しき奴隷の真似事をするなと。以来僕は料理などせぬことになっている。
Officially
王の
speaking.
子にはこんな技など必要ないのだ。
あの頃は王陛下もお忙しかった
Lord Ragnar.
何鳥だ？鳥はまだ作ったことがないな。
鶏でもカモでも。
ニコゴリか。なるほどな。
ラグナ、バカ野郎、伝令だ伝令。なんということだ。村人たちよ。
One of them got out of there because they didn't even know about her.
とにかくイングランド兵を蹴散らしたら移動しますんでよろしく。
だからこの後に及んでまだ敵地を進むと抜かすか。
Oh boy.
アシェラと連れてこい。今すぐだ。
今は前線で指揮を取ってます。話があるならご自分で出向けばいいんじゃ
Oh
ないですか。
man.
案内しますよ。
Don't leave. Don't come out.
口の聞き方もしちゃ
Oh god.
己の月の有無を見定められんで何が何
He's walking right into it, man.
今日こそ剣にかけて愚かさを思い知らせてやるわい。
This is it.
やっと気づいたか。鈍いなあんた。
貴様ら何を。
Oh man.
アシュラットの命令なんでね。
Yeah.
いいから呼べい。王子殿下に関わることだ。
Okay. Come on.
話す。
He deserves that much.
急げ。伺いましょう。その
There he is.
貴殿には感謝しております。あの腰抜け王子をよくぞ今日まで生かしてくださった。そして貴殿の死がさらなる成長を
This was set up a few episodes ago, right?
お役目は今日から私が引き継ぎます。貴様の神に誓い、不足なくわしの後を引き継ぎ。
He'll take a different approach.
クヌート殿下をお守りすると。急がれた方がいい。血をだいぶ失っておられる。
Go on, Lord Ragnar.
イエリングの帝臣たちは今、時代のデンマーク王の座をめぐって大きく二派に分かれておる。クヌート殿下は一方の派閥の
And the other is
もう一方は
Harold.
クヌート様の兄君のハラルド様だ。おそらく一つの決断を内心に下された。両殿下
Pour one
の
out.
うちどちらかを殺そうと。スベン王が王子を。
I think so, yeah.
こたび王陛下が殿下を戦場へ伴ったのは殿下を戦死させるためだ。クヌート殿下の真の敵は今やお父上のスベン王陛下
その人なのだ。
Right then, that sets up.
段取りをつけて。
Rest easy, man. Lord Ragnar.
なんてこって早めに言ってくれよ。そういうことはよ。頼む。最後に一目でいい。一目でかい。お別れや。ダメだ。
Yeah.
一緒に鶏料理でもきっと。
Wow. Okay, episode 15. Another great episode, right? They keep coming back to back. Yeah, I mean, you know, I certainly thought this was just the right type of episode to have after episode 14, right? I mean, of course, it had its own really sad moment, and, you know, in that sense, I thought the direction of this episode was just fantastic. Once again, right? It continues to be fantastic. That's a given at this point. This anime is guaranteeing fantastic direction, right? That's something that should be expected from this anime. And I love how, you know, the sunrise and the sunset kind of bookend the episode, right? As unfortunately the sun sets on Lord Ragnar, who in his final moments still kept fighting for Prince Canute. He still tried to make sure that somehow, you know, he's set up for success or he's set up for safety from this point on. Of course, you know, it probably kills him, absolutely kills him. I mean, it kills him that he has to leave him to a person like Askeladd, right? And he said as much, of course, straight to Askeladd's face. But, you know, he still tried to make the best of the situation, right? He still tried to kind of equip Askeladd, actually, to handle the situation down the line. And, you know, the big revelation here, mainly for Askeladd, because the audience, for us, the audience, it's kind of been there, right? You see it through Swen's attitude anytime the topic of this lost prince comes up. He's really laissez-faire about it. He's really just really calm about it, right? Seems almost bored about it, right? He's certainly quite disinterested, and more of that here. I mean, in the cold open to this episode, it's the most upfront that character has been about, you know, the loss of Canute and it not really meaning much to him, right? In fact, you know, before it goes into the opening, he even straight up implies if he was as great as Harald, his brother, he wouldn't have been lost, right? He wouldn't have been in this situation. Yet he's the one who put him in that situation in the first place. So he does end up, you know, in this situation, being lost and potentially being dead. So his motives are certainly, you know, brought to the forefront at this point in an attempt to perhaps stop any sort of friction, right, or divide at court. He made the choice to essentially send Canute off to his death, right? Unfortunately for Swen, Canute is not going to die that easily. Hell, he's going to go on and do great things, and I'm so damn excited. You know, Canute, you know, protect Canute at all costs. I adore this dude. I adore this character. You know, I love how that protective nature is kind of being passed on to the audience in that sense. Actually, I can just speak for myself, but that's the feeling I'm getting here, right? That he has been established as someone that the audience can really latch on to, really become protective of, right? And really care for his growth. And of course, you know, his growth is about to take a different turn, essentially, right? Because of course, Askeladd is going to take a different approach to his growth, but Askeladd is going to play a part in his growth. He does want to, you know, help him grow, because it goes back to that decision he made, right? As he chopped off that soldier's head, the gamble he took. And at that moment in time, he decided that he's going to put it all on the line, and even the lives of his men. And on that front, you see, you know, this episode certainly touches up on faith, or a lack of faith. And, you know, I'm talking about even beyond our priest, who I love to see. You know, I really love to see his character pop up in this show, in this anime, in this story. And And I'm hoping it kind of continues on that path. And I do get to see the progression of the priest. Again, honestly speaking, that's one of the most exciting side arcs of this story at this point. I'm always kind of thinking about the priest at any given moment, that last episode, man, yeah, that was just so fantastic. That really was so fantastic. You see a bit of the aftermath of the things that kind of go down in that episode here. And of course, as expected, the one that got away, right? Anne. She ends up telling Thorkell, or, Thorkell knows now because of Anne. And, they're in trouble. They're in trouble. Kind of quickly circling back to the lack of faith I was mentioning, I'm speaking of Askeladd's men. I'm speaking of one of those brothers, right? He said, this is not good. His brother thought, nah, man, come on. It's the English soldiers. They're pushovers. We'll take care of them. No. He meant something else. And that is something quite new, right, to experience for them and for us as the audience to see the first signs of cracks, right? These men, especially that individual, I don't know his name still, or any of the brother or the other brother's name either, but he was the one who was telling Bjorn, no, man, doesn't matter. His background doesn't matter to us. He's been a good leader. He's got luck on his side. He's delivered. So as long as it continues like that, they have no problem following Askeladd. But now, a few episodes later, the cracks are showing, right? And you see the moment he mentioned that kind of almost passed on to some of the other men in the room as well, right? You see in the facial animation. And then, of course, speaking of the men, the most prominent right-hand man, essentially, of that crew to Askeladd, Bjorn. Because I know for a fact that Bjorn has had concerns, right? And he's been a bit uneasy recently about Askeladd's attitude or the trajectory the crew's on at the moment and the choices Askeladd's making. So, of course, he's noticed all of this as well, right? But at this moment in time, he seems to be going with the flow. Things are kind of as they are, usually, right? But surely he is thinking of all of this. And yeah, I'm excited to see how this kind of plays out. Because, his crew he certainly has his crew in a bit of a pinch, right? And that was the notion anyways, right? That he was ready to put his crew at risk. He was ready to put their lives at risk. And then, of course, in subsequent episodes, it became clear that, yeah, putting their lives at risk isn't the biggest deal, really, given his, hatred for the Danes. Or, he said he despises the Danes, right? But the thing is, Bjorn sees this, that Askeladd has been a bit out of character recently and that he is putting the crew at risk, the men at risk, that he is being a bit more carefree about these things, that he is taking risks that he was not taking before, right? That was the thing that was established in the first half, essentially, really early on in the anime, that this individual, Askeladd, this man, he keeps it airtight. He does not take risks. He always kind of makes the call that is best for him. And then, of course, the crew as well, because he has to keep them happy, right? And like I mentioned earlier, there is an instant dose of karma already for Askeladd and his men. And honestly, I could totally see that karma kind of piling on. I really can. I could totally see his crew kind of getting picked apart one by one, essentially. I feel like sooner or later, surely they're going to pay a price, right? That they are going to face some losses. And that could be really soon. It really could be really soon, right? You have Thorkell on their tail once again. And there's other authorities that know about them. So, yeah. Let's see how it all plays out. I'm really... I'm excited to see how Bjorn handles this. Right now, he's still kind of, keeping a low profile, just the usual. But, going back to that revelation that Prince Canute is actually not as important of a figure as Askeladd first thought, right? That's why he was kind of annoyed that he's just now finding out about this. But, in that sense, of course, Lord Ragnar is not going to tell him about that before this, right? Because if he did, then, Askeladd's not going to be making such an effort, right, to protect Prince Canute. So, of course, in that sense, Lord Ragnar has done so much, right, to help this young individual, this young adult Prince Canute, to keep him alive, right? Even here, you see, in this situation, his thinking kept Prince Canute alive, or kept him going, right? But, that being said, now, this whole idea he had of kind of installing Prince Canute as king, I mean, that still remains. That's still his target at this point, right? And now he kind of has a free run at it in terms of kind of molding him or helping that growth, right? And of course, there is going to be growth. Yes, it's incredibly sad that Lord Ragnar had to die and die like that. I think he deserved better than that, but that's realistic, right? That's reality. But that goal is certainly still on his mind. But, things changed a bit. The fact that he's not really the one that's in pole position to be taking that crown up next means that, his gamble or his move, does it take another step up? Is there another notch to this? To install Prince Canute, King Sven has to go, right? Just how much is Askeladd going to gamble here? Just how much of a risk is he going to take here to make sure that Prince Canute is the one that becomes king rather than Harald, right? You see that even Thorkell had notions of installing Prince Canute as king, right? Or he had hoped that maybe by crowning him king, they could kick off a new dynasty. Now, there's also that angle that Askeladd has this information, right? And he could potentially use it come the right time. But the thing is, is Canute even going to listen to Askeladd, right? Even though Askeladd is telling him the truth, and he got it straight from the source, he got it from Lord Ragnar. You see that Prince Canute, there is a bit of denial there, perhaps, right? He so badly, so desperately wants to feel that his father does love him, right? But there's also that sense that he understands that, there's nothing there really. So there's perhaps a bit of denial, bit of acceptance, but a bit of, regardless of how my father sees me, I still want to make him proud. I still want to do great things to make him proud. Maybe then he might love me, right? Maybe once I prove myself, he might love me. So, in that sense, you see that he's actually lost, a father figure. But even though some of his actions, some of his techniques are more of a mother, and I'm speaking of Lord Ragnar, right? I mean, essentially, he has lost the closest thing he had to a parent in that sense, right? Lord Ragnar. And Lord Ragnar must have felt the same. This is perhaps he treated Prince Canute as his own child, essentially. He really sheltered him. He protected him from the evils of the court, and he really kept him alive all this time. Though of course there's an argument to be made that indeed it did kind of slow down Prince Canute's growth, or it didn't really, sheltering him from certain things certainly kind of stunted that growth in certain elements, right? And yes, it's going to be harsh. He's going to get some tough love here now that Askeladd's in charge, but I think it is crucial. It is crucial, and Gratianus mentioned that all that time ago, an old head, right? An experienced individual in life. He understood back then, and of course, the death flag was immediately raised a few episodes ago for Lord Ragnar, that he has to be removed from the picture. He has to be separated from Prince Canute. So he could reach the next level of his growth, of his life, essentially. But yeah, let's see how Askeladd reevaluates his plans from this point on after this revelation, right? It changes things. It certainly changes things and makes it really tough now. It's certainly a massive roadblock now, installing Prince Canute as king. So let's see how far he could take this, right? Can he get himself in a position to remove King Sven himself, right? Let's see. Could he take matters into his own hands as far as King Sven goes? But, that is a really, really slim notion there, because first of all, he would have to kind of get there. He has to get Prince Canute there, and then he has to be in the good graces of Prince Canute as well, right? To be able to kind of have an audience with people like King Sven. But as of this point, that is a distant notion, right? They seem to be in trouble. They really do seem to be in trouble. They're going to have a lot of speed bumps, roadblocks, hardships, trying to get Prince Canute back to King Sven, right? Who doesn't really want him to return. Earlier I mentioned Thorkell, and I love this character. I really do. I'm sure everyone loves Thorkell, right? I love how this character can kind of inject levity and comic relief into this kind of story, right? It's a really grounded story. It's really depressing. It's really harsh, right? Some of the themes and the things that are happening in the story, you need to go no further than episode 14, the last episode, right? So it's nice to have Thorkell kind of come in every now and then, right? And I love how there's this poetic nature to his disposition, right? Thorkell, that is this warrior, right? The ultimate warrior, essentially, as pure as it gets, who just at the thought of the war ending kind of depresses him, right? And I love that animation. But then, of course, he goes from depressed to really excited because of this newfound optimism through this tip that they get, right? Through Anne, essentially. So yeah, he's going to latch onto this. He's already latched onto it. The excitement is there for him that he can prolong this conflict, right? And gets to fight. The one thing he loves doing. Because you see, if there's no war, if there's no battles, there's not much that Thorkell really wants to do, right? He feels useless if he's not doing that. But good for Thorkell because he does get to do it, and really soon, right? And I love how there's again no mention of Askeladd. It's just Prince Canute and Thorfinn. He's been quite excited about Thorfinn, especially since he found out that indeed that is his relative, right? They are related. That he is his great uncle. So yeah, always a fun time to see Thorkell make an appearance. And yeah, it looks like he'll be making an appearance, all right. He'll be showing himself to our other crew really soon. Yes, he loves to fight, but he likes to fight to win, right? So the notion of potentially going up against King Swen in a blaze of glory, no. He did not even entertain that idea or notion one bit. He shut that down, right? And of course, this is after he finds out that there is going to be a complete surrender soon enough. And of course, one of the best parts of this episode was Thorfinn, Canute, and Lord Ragnar together in that cabin. Yeah, I really like that. And that was great for Thorfinn, wasn't it? And through that cabin scene and that cooking scene, right, and having a meal together, you see just how comfortable Prince Canute is around Lord Ragnar. It's clear that this is the individual he's most comfortable around. This is or was the individual that really allowed the real Prince Canute to come out. Right. And I love how, they kind of separate him from the cape and the helmet. Right. And you kind of get to see the real Prince Canute. And, the shyness wasn't there. It really wasn't. And of course, in that sense, you can see that Canute has kind of warmed up to Thorfinn. I mean, even Lord Ragnar warmed up to Thorfinn, right? So that was really great to see. Because he saw, right? Lord Ragnar saw this impact that this individual has had on Canute so far, right? He was the only other person that was able to kind of bring Canute out of his shell, that Canute was able to kind of converse with, right? Even if it was a bit of a butting of heads, right? There was that great moment as Lord Ragnar was almost kind of proud to see this, right? Him speaking with someone else. And this other individual happens to be someone of his own age. So he recognized that, yes, he needs to have people of his own age around him as well, a friend perhaps. And you can see, it's slowly getting there. You see that even Thorfinn seems to have warmed up to Canute a bit, right? For sure. I think he has. So yeah, of course, Thorfinn has a role to play here in Prince Canute's growth. And, it applies to Prince Canute as well. He's going to play a role for Thorfinn as well, right? Up until this point, Thorfinn's just been used to just going to the side, going to a corner by himself, having his meal. Or if it's not that, he's kind of in the middle of this crew of men that he does not really associate with all that much. It was like this really wholesome, lovely evening, right? That unfortunately took a dark turn because, Lord Ragnar was kind of lured into a trap. But yeah, it was a really nice moment. It really was. And I love that one shot of Canute kind of, slurping his soup or having his soup. And you see in the background, out of focus, you see the helmet and you see the cape to his left. But this is Prince Canute. This was in focus, right? And it felt like this is the real Prince Canute. And you see that he certainly breaks the mold, right? And Thorfinn noticed this, right? He said that one thing about, aren't you nobles the ones usually doing just the eating? So even Thorfinn's kind of getting to see this, that this person is different that he doesn't quite fit like a puzzle piece into that, preconceived notions of how nobles are meant to be, right? Or how they behave. So yeah, I think even that could kind of really allow Thorfinn to, be more friendly down the line as the episodes go on. He sees that, okay, this is also an individual who doesn't quite fit. And for the fellow One Piece fans, it's certainly reminding me of the whole cake arc, right? Sanji's backstory as well. His love for cooking and, a father figure who doesn't approve of this and, looks down upon it as something only peasants and the slaves are meant to be doing, right? So again, it goes back to that notion of him being most comfortable around Lord Ragnar, right? It's normal. They really did have a really fantastic relationship, right? Wholesome one. He allowed Prince Canute to be himself. But, going back to another really important moment, earlier in the episode, it's the priest, Lord Ragnar, and Prince Canute praying for the villagers, right? And praying for themselves, essentially. And you see, there's a lot of reactions to this, be it through Thorfinn, be it through ears. But yeah, you see the priest continues to have a crisis of faith, continues to have his doubt, falters in his faith, much to Lord Ragnar and Prince Canute's surprise. And of course, it kind of brings out this really agitated reaction out of Prince Canute, right? This notion of, not having absolute faith in that father, right? And then it kind of also doubles as, his own struggles in his upbringing and his relationship with his own biological father, right? But, like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of things at play here. You see that, of course, he's not that naive, that he does kind of realize his own father doesn't quite have love for him. But the notion of someone like a priest losing faith in that father, the almighty father, the one who's meant to love all his children, that really got to Prince Canute, right? Because that is the one father that is always going to have love for Prince Canute, right? But again, I think it's a bit more complicated than that, right? His relationship and his thoughts on his relationship with his father. This idea or notion I brought up earlier about him potentially wanting to make his father proud, I don't know how likely that is, given the fact that, as of this point, King Sven needs to be removed to have any chance of Prince Canute being installed as king, right? Because as of this point, Harald is the one King Sven's kind of decided on. But yeah, I'm really loving Thorfinn being around for this, really seeing Prince Canute, slowly kind of getting to know him. And again, like I said, the makings of a bromance are potentially there. And I'm liking it. I'm really liking this direction it's heading into. But, again, some tough times ahead for Prince Canute, and maybe Thorfinn can play a part here. And I mentioned the direction of the episode earlier. Yeah, really, I love how this story doesn't need to rush anything. It really lets us sit. It really allows the audience to take it all in, take their time to take it all in. There's no need for dialogue over some of these scenes. Certainly show, don't tell being utilized here to perfection, right? There's no need for superfluous dialogue or narration over some of these scenes. And of course, that kind of goes into the type of anime this is, right? The type of audience this anime is kind of geared towards. So yeah, again, it continues to be so impressive. And I felt that Lord Ragnar's death was given proper care, actually. And of course, it wouldn't be a review if I wasn't mentioning the animation or the visual side of things. Yes, once again, just beautiful imagery on display here. Love some of the low angle shots, some of the really extreme low angle shots of the cross. And, in that sense, you kind of see in that moment in time, maybe the priest feels like this almighty father is kind of looking down on him, right? Looking down upon them. Kind of another notion that was brought up in episode 14 through Anne, right? That it was tough for her to understand that idea that, he sits on his throne so high up looking down on them. She wasn't quite able to comprehend that or accept that, right? That it was a tough idea for her to accept. But yeah, again, the visual storytelling is top notch, second to none. And I love that moment as Lord Ragnar is kind of having his final moments and he has this memory of Prince Canute, right? His mind kind of goes back to that memory of a young Prince Canute. And at that moment, the sun is kind of setting, right? And by the time he does end up passing on, it has set, right? The sun has set. And again, there's that final visual of, wow, you know, Askeladd kind of standing there and a dead Lord Ragnar. I mean, you know, the imagery in this anime really lingers in your mind long after an episode ends, right? Really makes you think, really kind of haunts you. And there's also that moment as he kind of clutches on to the sword, even though he knows, right, he's about to die. Yet he did have that urge, that notion of kind of latching onto the sword in his final moments, right? Yeah, I thought that was an interesting moment to have. But yeah, that's about it for this one. Like I said, yet another fantastic episode of this anime. If you enjoyed that, consider dropping a like, consider dropping some comments, give me your thoughts. If you're interested in full length or early access or full opacity, consider checking out the Patreon page. The link is in the description and the pinned comment. Also, there's a link to my social media, Twitter specifically, if you're into that. But yeah, I'm really quite excited to continue this on to the next episode. So until then, take it easy.